Welcome to the Shortest Figma course. First things first, what is Figma? Figma is a web-based collaborative design and prototyping tool. Creating a new file is as easy as hitting new design file. As soon as a new file opens, this is where the fun begins. Everything is broken down into 3 panels. You have the left panel here. As you start adding objects in your designs, you'll start seeing all the layers show up. The right panel allows you to make adjustments to it, like its color, or if you're working with text, the ability to choose a font, the size, and so on. The right side also gives us access to the prototyping settings, from where we can go ahead and present our prototype or share our design file. On the bottom here, you have the Figma toolbar, from where you can add frames, shapes, text, and so on. Looks like we just got a client email from a client who happens to have the same name as me. They need a mobile e-commerce homepage with beautiful items and big buttons to convert users into money. Let's get started on this design. First things first, we'll need frames. Frames are containers that hold elements in your designs together to form a screen. You can create frames from here, hit F on the keyboard, and you'll get some options for different sizes that you may want. Of course, you can draw your own frame with a custom size, but I would typically go ahead and select one of these. Now we have a frame and we can start adding elements to it. Let's rename our frame to homepage, rename our file to e-commerce project. What a clever name. And let's get designing. Now, frames can often be confused with groups, which are also containers and are typically good for holding a couple items inside of your frames. Anyways, we don't need that here. What we want to do is utilize some assets that Figma already gives us. In the asset panel, we can actually access all the libraries that we have. So if we're working with a mobile app, we can simply use an iOS status bar and even a nav bar if we want to. This way, you don't need to design everything from scratch. Looking for something more? The community tab over here also gives you access to tons of templates and resources. So you can definitely search for some UI kits in here. This project even has some product cards that I can steal. But we're here to learn Figma. So let's go back to our project and create some product cards from scratch. Sometimes it's helpful to add a layout grid, which we can choose between grid, columns, and rows. Most commonly, we use a column one, and I'm going to set it to 4. And you can define the margin and even the gutters. Now I have some sort of guide as I go on to designing my product cards. For my product cards, I can use shapes, stretch it across, give it a nice corner radius of 20 pixels, and start writing a title. Add a nice description. Maybe we can contain these inside of our image and create a button to add to cart. This is the foundation for a super basic e-commerce design. Now, designing this in a bit of a hurry, some of the alignments are off here, but not to worry. You can select multiple items together and use alignment options over here. You can also use Alt and hover over other elements to see what you've selected in relation to that element. Now we're getting somewhere. As you do this more and more, you'll get pretty handy at the shortcuts that Figma has to offer, like hitting F for frames, R for rectangles, T for text. These shortcuts can end up saving you hours of trying to find what you're looking for. To get better at them, from the help section, you can open the keyboard shortcuts and see which ones you've mastered and which ones you haven't mastered yet, so you can get better at them. All right, back to our designs. If you don't want to always align things together, you can use what's called an auto layout. Now, if you do try to create an auto layout, you might not always get what you're looking for. That's where you can utilize Suggest Auto Layout. Figma will go ahead and actually create nested frames inside of each other based on what you already have without messing it up. And now we have an auto layout frame. I can easily switch items around and not even worry about the alignment because everything is aligned. I can adjust the alignment from the right, from the bottom, from the left super easily when I have an auto layout frame. Now, of course, I want a couple of these. I'm going to hit Command D to duplicate them and bring them down here. Now I have a couple products. I can also create an auto layout between them by hitting Shift A. But now there's a little problem. We're working on our e-commerce app and we discovered we probably want to add a little background gradient over here. We'll use Ignore Auto Layout here to create this background, place it over our objects, bring it all the way down here, and create the gradient. This is applied to the first product, but what about the other ones? That's where components come into play. By hitting Alt-Command-K, I've turned this card into a component. It has this cool little icon here. I'm going to drag this one out because this is our main component. and instead place 3 in my layer and get rid of these old ones. What does that mean? If I decide to change my gradient or the color of my text, it gets applied to all products. This way, you're not sitting there making repetitive designs, saving you a couple hours, and that gives me enough time to drink more coffee and scroll on X. Okay, this is starting to look good, but we don't have any data in here. We can use the action menu to access our plugins and start filling this with some content. I like this Google Sheets Sync plugin. I can actually set up a product table in Google Sheets with a little bit of magic, or layer name changing in our case. I'll run the plugin and boom, we have our data filled in. Broken, but it's filled in. With a few minor changes, we can make this look much better. Now, of course, we're going to fill in some images, make this product page look real good. And before you know it, we have a beautiful e-commerce app going. We can play around with a few effects, which give us the ability to add some drop shadows, blur effects like background blur, the ability to add a blur behind our product. Now, once you start adding a bit more to your designs, you'll notice you'll have more components, you'll have more text, and that's where adding local styles start to become handy. You can add styles for text, color, effects, or grids, allowing you to reuse them in multiple places. You can create a primary color, choose your app's primary color, and then apply it to your items. If you ever change your mind about your app colors, making changes can happen in one place. Same goes for adding text styles, which we can do from our properties panel. Clicking anywhere on the canvas shows you all the local styles you have so far. As you get more complicated with your design system, you can start using variables, which gives you the option to add more shades and create tokens around where you're using what colors. Now, this isn't a deep dive on variables, so let's go back and explore Figma. Once you start putting together more components, more local styles, you're starting to actually put together a nice library. You can access your library here and even use it across other files. Talk about being an efficient designer. There's a couple ways to share this with the client. I can click share, copy link, and just email it back to them. Or if your clients are still living in the early 2000s, you can go ahead and actually export your screens from here and it will save as a separate image. Now, if you really want to impress your client, you could put together a realistic prototype. Once you start putting together more frames and you want to create a connection between different frames, so when you do tap on the product card, it navigates the user to this item detail page and does it with different animations. You have move in, move out, push. This gives you the ability to really wow your client by letting them try it on their own device. So as you start adding more frames, your prototypes can become more sophisticated and things can start working. Now that wraps up a bit of almost everything you can do in Figma. Maybe that was too quick. Now I do have a couple links below if you do want to check out a longer, more hands-on course where we'll design complete mockups and prototypes. Let's get designing.